The Swans drop 2 in a row as a Brownlow favourite comes under fire. The Blues falter as the Giants power and Lions keep their finals hopes alive. And can Flagmantle secure a top 2 finish? We unpack all that and more. This is Access All Areas thanks to Crypto.com. Great to have your company on this Monday. Damien Barrett and Matthew Lloyd are here. We're getting straight into it because Isaac Heaney's Brownlow chances could be at risk. He's going to come under fire by the MRO for this incident, Damo, which left Jimmy Webster bloodied.
We've got a week of high drama coming up, Nat. There is a Brownlow medal at stake with this action here. Now, people may say it's careless, people may say it's intentional, but the rules, Lordo, as you well know, off-season, were changed to view that moment as intentional. And as a full forward, as you once were, and as Heaney was in that moment, take us through what's going on and why you think he's in trouble.
He's in trouble because you can't fling your arm back like that to lose a defender. So I think it was accidental in terms of, he didn't want to whack him in the face, but the rule has been changed where this becomes now intentional. So last year, it's not careless anymore. So this turns into at least a week, in my opinion. Could have been worse if Jimmy didn't see out the game. So I just don't see how he gets off that. You can't be so reckless as Heaney was there and just fling your arm back to lose an opponent. And hit him in the head like that.
I agree with the match review office. I think it's obliged to make that a one-week ban. Equally, I see it going through the tribunal system that on Tuesday night and maybe even the appeals tribunal. I mean, that's where they probably need the Carlton player advocate to argue their case because he's had more success than anyone in this space. And it's going to be dragged out, isn't it? The system will allow him to challenge it at all stages.
Well, there is an incident from the weekend they might be able to use in their defence, the Sydney Swans. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show. But let's unpack the game because the Saints handed the Swans their second straight loss. And even though St Kilda aren't going to make finals, they're still having an impact. And they came back from 29 points down, Lloydie.
The pressure was unbelievable, Nat, and some big moments there. Callum Wilkie, I don't know, I thought the curse was on the Saints here when Rowan Marshall's ball popped down. I thought, oh no, poor St Kilda again. But they were the better side. They kicked 9 goals to 3 after half-time. There was some Warner heroics, Damo.
Yeah, there were. And Heaney getting the ball to Logan McDonald for the second week in a row, having a shot at goal to decide the game. Now, that's a far better execution of a kick, but it's still faded.
I like that he wanted the shot. He said, I'm taking it, but unfortunately he missed again. And the scenes on the siren, this was brilliant by St Kilda. That was a brave win and by far and away their best performance of the season.
It certainly was a brave moment. It's not our Crypto.com brave play, though. That goes to Dougal Howard. The desperation Damo here just to get a finger on it. And then he ends up in the Sydney Swans cheer squad as well for his trouble.
Yeah, well, when you win a game as they did by that kick and you then watch back what he did there and put everything on the line, and it just goes to show that when the ARC had a review of the moment, that's how close the result was, and we saw what it meant to him, and he put everything on the line literally to save it.
Oh, Abees, you know what? I mean, that was outrageous. No one in the Swans cheer squad wanted to really help him out. Now, it was after that amazing moment, Lloydie, that the Saints really kicked into gear and they ramped up their pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. 9 goals to 3 after half-time, and Ross Lyon's spoken in his media conferences about we're trying to move the ball quick, but we just can't get cohesion. We can't really turn those into scores. And I love what they did yesterday. So their willingness to play on and take the game on. They had Sydney at 6s and 7s. Look at them. There's 3 Swans players all together, players coming up at it. But Henry, I thought he instigated in this third quarter. So to get easier shots. So sometimes they'd go back behind the mark and they might have been just kicking to Max King. There was options everywhere yesterday. So, again, through the corridor, opening up Sydney. Sydney, do we come forward? Do we go back? They open them right up. And pressure like this from Jack Higgins, it was inspiring. So, there's still 24 points down at this stage. But they're tucked on the boundary. There's no inkling just to stop and go back behind the mark. They just kept playing on. You can see Brodie Grundy, he's even lost their players. Malikan, he's stuck. He didn't know what to do. A bit embarrassing. I've done that before. Memory where you mark someone else's ball on the goal line, and then this is just brilliant play out the back, chains of play. They were all queuing up in the end. So Sydney have got some issues. They've been opened up by Fremantle and also St Kilda the last few weeks. but St Kilda loved it, and a big tick for Rossi Lyon. I think they've been working hard on that at training, finally got some reward.
You say opened up, but they've lost a game of footy by a couple of points.
Yeah.
They lost one, the Swans this is, by Fremantle by 1 point, and previous to those losses was a 4-point loss to Richmond. 8 points in total. There's not a lot to worry about just yet, is there, from the Swans' perspective?
No, not a heap, but they have come back to the field, I would say, a little bit more than they were a month ago.
Is that the blueprint, though? That's how you beat the Swans?
Yeah, I think so, Nat. And teams are controlling the ball a bit more against the Sydney Swans than they were earlier in the season.
Well, let's get to the MCG now, because it was a demolition of the Eagles. The D's winning by 54 points yesterday. It keeps them in touch with the top 8, Damo, and their forward line. We've spoken about it at length. It's lacked cohesion at times and a strong target, but this man here took ownership yesterday.
Yeah, Jacob Van Rooyen, he's going to be some type of player in a few years' time, I think. I mean, again, I just need to temper it just a little bit. It was West Coast Eagles. I don't want to take away from what he did, because it was a good performance on a MCG on a Sunday, but you just need to factor that part of it in. Melksham coming back, it just gave them some more stability up there. And again, if they get it right, there's still going to be a danger. They're not in the 8 after round 17, but they've still got time. Well,
the storyline out of this game is, of course, the West Coast Eagles and their coach, Adam Simpson. The pressure continues to mount. We had rumours of player disharmony last week. He addressed it on Friday. Then he had to double down after the match. This is what he said after the loss to the D's.
I'm here to do a job as best I can, and I'll do that until I get tapped on the shoulder. So it's not, that's not really in question. So I sort of know how long the road's going to be. I'm up for it, but if the club's not, then they're not. So that's fine. I'm okay with my football mortality.
It's almost hard to watch that. That's the first time I've felt that he looks as though he's finished. I think it's always going to be coming. Just want to refer you both back to a conversation I had with Don Pyke on AFL.com.au at the start of the year over what he expected. Now, Don Pyke's come back as CEO of this football club, and you can see what he said there pre-season. He wanted to watch it unfold. I want to see them be better. I want to see the future. It's basic, it's fundamental. Back to the foundation of establishing an identity around who we are, how we play, what we stand for. We just want our people to be proud. He went on to say that those things are measurable. You'll be able to see them and feel them. I don't think we can see any improvement, and we certainly can't feel any improvement. So the inevitability attached to Adam Simpson now leaving the club, it's now in play, and it's just a matter of when, unfortunately, for him. And I think it's fair, Lordo. They've given him every chance to work his way through this, and there was a 5-week period this year where it seemed to have turned, but it ultimately hasn't.
And they'll need someone with a form of experience, whether they've been in the game for 10 years, even as an assistant coach, because I just think that the job they're walking into will be a tough job where it's going to be hard yards for at least 3 to 4 years before you see life and maybe some finals football, because their list, apart from Harley Reid, doesn't show a lot of signs of some good kids coming through.
Let's talk about the Brisbane Lions now. They're up into 7th position on the ladder. 5 straight wins now after this victory yesterday against the Adelaide Crows, and Lachie Neale was outstanding. A complete performance from him with 3 goals to go with those 36 touches. Could he potentially, Damo, have another Brownlow to go with the 2 that he's already got?
His past 2.5 months has been quite extraordinary as this team has resurged itself into the calculations. Nat, and on top of the 2 wins he's had, he also was unlucky in another one where he's runner-up. Yeah, there's no reason he's not going to be right up there once again.
Nat, he spoke a few years ago, and he'd won a Brownlow at that stage, about he wants to get better by getting more metres gained and kicking more goals. So the guy just doesn't stop. He's never happy with where he's at. He just continues to drive standards better, and it's why he's a champion of the game.
Now, Lloydie, for the Crows, it was their 10th loss for the season, and that's been compounded by Isaac Rankin coming under MRO scrutiny for this incident with Brandon Starcevich. What did you make of it?
It wasn't good. I know he wouldn't have meant to hit him in the head, but in that situation, when you're a vulnerable player, it was what used to roll me most. As a forward, this is the opposite here, where when you are loose as a player and a player just hits you when you're not ready for it, that's something that I don't like in the game, and he deserves the 3 weeks he'll probably get.
The ramifications on this are cleaner from a match review perspective. Nat, he was concussed and subbed out of the game. I just raised that in the context of the Jimmy Webster who was able to, while bloodied, play on.
Saturday night, NG Stadium. The Giants' season was on life support at quarter time. 39 points down against Carlton. Somehow managed to turn the tables. And Lloydie, it was off the back of their midfield doing the hard yards.
Yeah, Callum Ward played the best game I've seen him play. He was huge, kicking goals. Steve Coniglio, Cincotta was trying to get to him after every centre bounce. That didn't work. And I thought Briggs was beaten early by De Koning, but then took over in that period. Callaghan's a star. So they were smashed through the midfield, and when Walsh and Cripps went missing in the second and third quarters, the game changed.
You're concerned about the backup, aren't you? We've talked about it enough for the Blues' perspective, but when it was required on the weekend, it wasn't there. But just on the Giants, though, the scoreboard forced them to change on the run, and it was beneficial to them. The fact they were 6 goals down.
You're right on that, but their best is so good, and Jesse Hogan was the one who benefited from it. So I do hope they make the finals and they make it in a good way, because there's some teams who are just there, but I don't think they're going to be a threat. Whereas the Giants, I know they've been poor for a few months, but their best we've seen last year and on the weekend is preliminary final worthy. So I just hope they can get it together as a side, because they're far better than what they've shown.
Well, they're back inside the top 8, 9 wins, 7 losses for the season. And as you mentioned, Jesse Hogan having a terrific season, 41 goals for 2024 so far. Just on Carlton, so we talked about the second-tier players. They didn't really stand up when they needed to, and they were relying too heavily on Cripps and Walsh to do their bidding in the midfield.
So they have been pretty good, but it's off the back of those guys being really playing well. So I was disappointed with Elijah Holland's game and Adam Chera's games. I thought they were poor. And Orazio's played one good game. It was last week. So I think he and Fogarty had a poor game as well. He was good the week before. So on Fantasia, I'd bring Jesse Motlop in, because I still think their small forwards are a little concern at Carlton.
And they're not afraid to make tough selection calls. To leave George Hewitt out of that team, to bring Matthew Cottrell back in, it was the right call, I think, on selection. But it just goes to show that they have got some depth and they'll keep experimenting.
Well, next up they have the Western Bulldogs, that game at Marvel Stadium on Saturday. We're going to talk about North Melbourne now, their second win for the season, and perhaps we're seeing a new brand post-bye from the Roos, Lloydie.
When you're at rock bottom or you're going really poorly, it comes back to your pressure in your contest. It was with Carlton last year, I remember that's what it came back to. And with North, it's coming out of North Melbourne. We had to improve our pressure. And look, tackles have gone from 15th to first, contest 15th to second. And if you get that right, everything else comes off the back of it. And then their points for and points against have improved. And they caused, Suns could have won this game. Ainsworth misses a shot he should have kicked late in the game, but it was the pressure that North created, and that created panic. And that's what they've done for the last 4 weeks. Hasn't resulted in wins. They've won 2 wins. They could have won more than that. But this pressure will keep you in any game of footy.
You feeling positive, Damo, about the
Roos? There's reason to be now, Nat. And it's been 5 weeks of really good footy. And I know you're fair enough to ask the question. I have been critical of them, but I don't back away from that. But the wins now that have come against West Coast and Gold Coast, to bookend that 5-week period, the better performances were the losses in between, particularly with that 9-goal lead, 1-point loss to Collingwood, and the week after against Melbourne. So, yeah, it's sustainable with what they're doing.
For Gold Coast, their horror run on the road away from home has continued. They're 8-8. They're sitting well outside the top 8. Finals just seem like a distant memory, really. And this is what their coach, Damien Hardwick, had to say after the game.
I'm angry, to be fair. And as a footy club, we've got to grow the up, to be perfectly honest. Excuse the language, but we've been in this situation too many times. So it's up to me and the match committee to sit there and get our boys going.
Guys, I think Damien Hardwick himself needs to grow up at certain points in medium moments. It's not the first time he's come across as a sook this year alone. He was a sook at times when it started to turn at Richmond. And while I get what he's trying to do to toughen the whole part of the football club up, I don't think that does him or the club any justice. And ultimately, in his first season, at the same stage of the season in which they sacked Stuart Dew last year, he's 1 win better off. That club's 1 win better off. I know he's taking the blame as well, but I think it hasn't been anywhere near the success that he wanted it to be.
But he's not being a sook in that situation. He's putting it on his players and himself and the club.
I think he's come across as a sook. Things aren't working for him in that moment, and they weren't good enough to deal with the moment against a team that has only won 1 game to that point.
I think it shows his passion and how much he cares
I'm not doubting that.
This and the anger and frustration. I mean, we all know in post-match situations, it's heightened.
It's not that hard to not drop an F-bomb in a media moment, Nat, when you've got time to think about it.
It's true. I mean, I did like it, but I am a
He didn't need to drop the F-bomb, but I liked that he's just not going to tolerate it, and he's part of the problem there. And they've got issues. They've got issues, and I just think it's a mental problem, because how can you be so good at home and so bad away? It's all between the ears for this team. I'd be putting.
What are they doing wrong though? What's he referring
to? In this situation here, well, they aren't effective inside forward 50, so they have the second most inside 50s, but they score ranked 17th for those scores, so they're just bombing the ball away. But I'd be looking at individuals. He might have to drop some players and look at some individuals and say, okay, these are your numbers at home, but these are your numbers away. We can't trust you away. So he might have to delve that deep and go, we can't pick a certain player until you show us that you're stronger mentally. Because when you jump on a plane and you walk to a different ground, you just don't produce for us, and that's what it's.
Is he better off making that type of statement with the remaining matches, or to try and regroup and just scrounge a place in the finals? What's the better for the big picture?
Yeah, I think I'd do it now. I don't want them in the finals because we're giving up a spot because they're going to have to travel to Melbourne or travel somewhere else, and they're not ready for it at the moment. Yeah.
Well, the Cats are back. That is one thing that is for sure. They're half a game outside the top 4 after beating Hawthorn on Saturday. And credit has to go to Chris Scott, who has been willing to move the Magnets around and revive Geelong's midfield. Damo, are they going to stick with this mix?
Oh, why not? Why not? It's working. And it's rejuvenated that player on screen there in Tom Stewart. We saw what happened when they experimented with Sam De Koning against his brother 3 weeks ago to start this process. It didn't work in that game, but it worked for Sam De Koning, and it's now become a bonus. And Tom Stewart coming back into the play so regularly, the different role for Ollie Dempsey, it's full credit to him. And they've benefited, it's hard to say this, but they've benefited from Tom Hawkins not being available too, with what it's done with their mindset as much as their ball movement. What
about the Hawks, Lloydie? Because their 5-game winning streak came to an end. They rarely play at GMHBA Stadium. On Thursday, when I went out to training, they had brought in their boundary line, but it looks like they didn't necessarily play the ground all that well.
You could see Geelong were on nice and early, like the hunt and the way they hunted this up-and-coming Hawthorn team. Like for the first time, Hawthorn maybe had a bit of a target on their back because everyone's talking about them and hyping them up. But you've got to run the ball out at Geelong. You've got to use hands. You've got to lower your eyes. And Hawthorn just blazed away and bombed away. So it was a complete performance by Geelong and a fair few learnings for Hawthorn.
Yeah, it sets up a great match on Friday night, doesn't it? Geelong and Collingwood. On to flag mantle. I love this terminology, but their 10th win of the season. I know it was against Richmond, so we're not getting too carried away, but they're half a game behind Carlton in 3rd place now. Can they go all the way?
Why not? Why not? I mean, you just saw Josh Tracy take a mark there and he kicked 5 goals. And his emergence this season has been a competition story, not just a Fremantle story. And the vibrancy with which they have now played the last 6 weeks is compelling.
Yep, so they can get over Carlton and finish 2nd. Well, then you go, OK, they are a genuine chance because they can stay in Perth for the first final, maybe a prelim, and then come here for a grand final. So their last Melbourne performance, they got belted by the Western Bulldogs. So that's probably still the last thing they've got to pass is performing better in Melbourne.
Well, I think a game in Essendon in about 4 weeks' time is going to be a real test for flag mantle. Quick hands now. Damo, for you, should Brandon Zerk-Thatcher have been cited for this incident on Aaron Norton?
I say no, Nat, but we highlighted here to just goes to show how lucky or fortunate you can be. Now, Norton was taken out of the game on the back of a concussion element out of that hit. We just raised it in the context of what happened to Isaac Heaney. Yeah. He was unfortunate in terms of drawing blood on Webster, and Brandon Zerk-Thatcher totally overlooked. I'm just surprised there was not more of a referencing as to why he was cleared, but we might hear that during the course of the day. Hey, Lloydie, sitting 2 points outside the top 4, were Port fans too harsh on Ken?
No, I thought they were very poor against the Brisbane Lions. Yeah, I hate, you don't boo your coach. That's pretty disrespectful. But
I hated that.
Yeah, I hated that. But they were poor that day, but well done to Ken and his team for turning it around. Nat, for you, do the Dogs rely too heavily on Marcus Bontempelli?
Yes, he's been carrying this team for way too long. Others need to stand up if they're ever going to challenge again for a premiership. Damo, how many years will it take Richmond to rebuild?
I'm going to pull a number out of nowhere here, Nat. 5 years.
Okay,
and
good.
I don't think they've even hit rock bottom yet, and I think that's a part of their problem with where they are at. Lordo, does Jordan De Goey need to do more?
19 disposals on the weekend. As a midfielder, it's pretty easy to get 25 to 30 these days, and I think too much is on Nick Dacos, and still Pendlebury and Sidebottom were so good the other night. Like, when are we going to have some players take pressure off them? And he's the one that needs to lift if they're to make a charge this year. One for you, Damo. Does Dylan Shields' impressive return give Bomber fans another reason to think they'll break this hoodoo?
I think it does.
7,000 days plus.
You wanted that in, didn't you?
7,245 days.
Oh, exactly. No, I think it does. I love what he did in the last quarter. The game had to be won in that moment. He stood up, and his first game back for some time. And they've also got Darcy Parish to come back in as well. Depth is a real key for this club at the moment, and it's all working quite nicely.
The Crypto.com tipping leaderboard, and surprise, surprise, Damo is still on top, and we are never. Who did you miss out on?
I went wrong. I tipped Port the Doggies to beat Port, and I tipped the Hawks to beat the Cats.
Why would you do
a couple
that?
of bad
No
ones.
way,
for me,
tipped
yeah.
Geelong all the way. All right, this is all we have time for on Access All Areas. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you again next Monday.
Join me, Cal Toomey,
and me, Riley Beveridge,
every Wednesday on Gettable, the definitive source of everything you need to know for player movement, trade, free agency, draft and contracts.
Watch Gettable every Wednesday or catch it as a podcast wherever you listen.